everybody, it's Ryan again with Dirt Bike Project Channel, and today we're going to be showing you how to clean up old plastics. So this tank looks pretty good. I did this one earlier, and other than the big gouge you see there in the middle, some of the bigger stuff you just can't get out. But the rest of it looks pretty darn good. And if you look at the other side of this fuel tank, you can tell it's got a lot of scratches. It's older, pitted. This is just normal wear and tear from holding the bike between your legs and going riding. So you can clean up this stuff to make it look like this again. It's pretty easy to do, but it does take a little bit of effort, take some time, and I'm going to show you how to do that today in this video. So there's a few things to keep in mind before we get started. First of all, there's some plastics that just can't be fixed. So this front fender is a really good example. I got this bike used and I don't know what happened to the front fender, but this is literally coming apart. It's cracking. I don't even know if chemicals spilled on it or what. I've never seen plastic do that before. This is done. You're gonna have to buy new plastics. I can't do anything with that. The next thing to consider is some of your plastics are going to have stickers on them. So this is the radiator shroud, and in my case I actually bought a whole new plastic kit, so I don't need to do anything with these plastics. I'm just going to put brand new ones on it. But if you are going to do this on your existing plastics, this is a wet sand process. You're going to have to remove any stickers. So if you don't want to do that, then you might consider just doing maybe the final step in this video, which is basically waxing it and polishing it instead, and that'll get you a shinier plastic, but it's not going to look quite as nice as going through the whole sanding process. So that's some things to consider. So decide for yourself on your bike if you want to remove your stickers or not. So in this case, I'm doing a whole new plastic kit, and of course the fuel tank doesn't come with a plastic kit, and the fuel tank on just the sides here is what shows. The radiator shrouds and things go here, and so you don't see this part of the tank. You only see the side and maybe the top. I haven't done the top yet, but the top isn't anywhere near as scratched up as the sides. I can probably just polish the top up a little bit, make it look nice, just clean it like I normally would. So in order to do this, you're going to need a little bit of equipment, and most of it's just sandpaper. So we're going to wet sand, so you need a bucket of water, and you're going to need a whole bunch of different grits of sandpaper. Anywhere from, I've got a 220 in here, is probably about the lowest grit you want to go, or the coarsest grit you want to go, and that's for the deeper scratches. On my case, I was a little lazy and I did an experiment on using a power sander, and normally I wouldn't do this, but it actually turned out really well. So this is dry sanding, but this is a piece of 320. I don't think I would go any coarser than that. In fact, I would have preferred a 400 if you can find it, but this worked pretty well. I'm going to show you that in this video, but you're going to want to step up in several increments all the way up to probably at least 1,000 or 1,500 grit. So I've got 320 on the power sander, and then I'm going to go to a 400 to get those scratches out. And you do want to keep the grit that you're going to hand sand pretty close to the one you use on the machine if you're going to use the machine. I think I have a 500 in here somewhere. Yeah, I've got 500 to step up from there. And then I've got various others in here. I've got 1,000, I've got a 3,000, I've got a 1,500. I don't think you need to go necessarily that high, but I was kind of experimenting with this. It actually came out really nice. So if you want it to come out looking like mine, probably go for a 2,500 or a 3,000 for your final grit. And then at the end, we're going to polish it. So I've got some basically clear plastic polish here that worked pretty good. I think that the Turtle Wax, though, did a little bit better job as far as filling in those last little nooks and crannies, which you'll see in the video how that works, and comes out pretty good. So some sort of polish, doesn't have to be these brands, and then of course some towels and applicators for the wax, and buff out the polish when you're done. So that's the equipment we need, so we're going to get started here. Okay, I just started sanding this, obviously not even close to done. I just hit this pretty quick, and as soon as you start sanding it, you'll notice that the darker plastics, this one's blue, turns white really quickly. But what you want to do is use your sander to slowly go through and get out all of these big scratches. Now, remember on this side, I had kind of a big gouge, and you're not going to be able to get that out. I mean, you don't want to sand the thing so thin that you poke a hole in your gas tank or anything like that. So there's certain bigger things that you're just not going to be able to get out, but I think I can get out everything on this side. There's not any big gouges. There's a couple of bigger scratches here, especially right in here, and there's a few up here you can see, and I'm just going to sand those out. So spend some time here. Go carefully. Only do the parts that you're going to sand. Try not to nick up anything else on the tank. And once you get it to the point where it all looks nice and uniform and these scratches are gone, then you're probably ready to go on to the manual sanding part, which I'll get to. So let's sand this a little bit more, and I'll kind of show you what it looks like once this is done getting all the scratches out. Okay, I've been sanding for quite a while. I still have a little bit more work to do. As you can see, I've got a few more scratches in here. I'm going to actually try showing you also what it looks like to wet sand with a 220, which is probably about the coarsest you want to go, which is a little coarser than what I have on the machine, and show you what that looks like. I'm going to see if I can put a little bit of extra grit on some of these deeper scratches. Might come out a little bit faster. Let's see what happens here. Okay, you can see that I've been wet sanding this for a little while with the 220. My 320 grit on the machine was kind of running out of, or is wearing out, and it wasn't working as well. So I did some manual sanding with the 220. So hopefully you can see the contrast there in the sun, in the water. Basically what you're looking for is that all these scratches are uniform. So these are all 220 scratches, and then we're going to go up and we're going to get rid of the 220 scratches with 320 or 400 or something, and then basically keep repeating that until this is really smooth again. So another way to get contrast in this is to just take a towel, dry it off, and you can see it dry, and you can actually see it a lot easier in person. So I just dried this plastic off, and it's kind of hard to see in the video to get it just right, but you'll start being able to actually see all the little scratches and imperfections that are in this, and you can go back and fix those with the 220. The more work you do in the beginning stage of this, the easier it will be. If you find a scratch later that you wanted to go back and get out, you're going to have to start back over at the whatever grit's going to get that scratch out, and then resand from there all the way on up to the higher grits. So this is looking pretty darn good. I'm going to try to get a couple more of these other little pieces out, but the rest is looking pretty good. All those big scratches over here are gone, and basically we're just going to have 220 scratches to get out in just a minute here. So I'm going to finish up with the 220, and then I'm going to head on over to a higher grit, and just going to keep going. Okay, we've got 320 pretty much done, and I just dried it off, and I'm looking at what I've got here, and what I'm looking for is signs to show me that I'm done or not. And it looks like I need to sand a little bit more, and I don't know if you can see this in the video, but I can see scratches going down this direction right here, and a few up here. It's very difficult to tell if you can see that in the video, but we want to make sure that all that gets out of there. So rule of thumb, do how much you think it needs and then double it at least. You don't want to move on to the next grit until you know you're done, and it's okay if you feel like you've messed up or went too far. Just drop down a grit and do it again. And what you're looking for is a nice uniform scratches from whatever grit sandpaper that you've been using, and you want to make sure that all these other little things are out. Another good example, or a good way to see this, is if I was using my power sander. It's an orbital sander, so it has these little tiny circles all over the place, and so when you sand with a 320, or sorry, it'd be probably a 400. The 320 was on the orbital sander. I would probably go to a 400 next, and you'd sand with 400 until all those little circles were gone out of this plastic. So anyway, this is just rinse repeat, and I'm going to sand with the 320 just a little bit more, and if I have to, I'll drop down again back to 220, but I don't think I'm going to need to. And I'm going to go up to a 400 after that, and I'll show you what it looks like after the 400. Alright, so here we are. I just did a whole bunch of sanding with the 400 grit, and you can see most of this is really good. We have nice uniform single direction 400 scratches. I don't see any real deep ones. If I look real close, there might be a couple of little spots where, I don't even know if you can see in the video, you can see that the scratches don't run with everything else, so that I know that those came from either an earlier sandpaper, or maybe I just didn't quite get those out with the 220. That's a little out of focus. And but that's looking pretty darn good. At this point, there's probably not much else I can do with this. Is about as good as it's going to get. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do a little bit more on the 400 just to make sure it's good and done, and then I'm going to step it up to the 500 that I have. Unfortunately, I don't have a 600 or an 800 that would bridge the gap up to my 1000, so I usually have to spend a little extra time on the 1000. But the smaller steps you have, kind of the easier it gets. You don't have to spend quite as much time on each one. But most of the work is done in these first 2 or 3 grit changes, and after that you can start going a lot faster. You'll also notice that when this is wet, which I don't have any water on my fingers, but over here is wet, you'll notice this is going to start turning more and more blue for you and look smoother and smoother as we get to the higher grits. So I'm going to step it up to the next grit and show you how it looks. Alright, there it is after the 500 grit. I'm just going to keep going, and we'll see how it looks. I'm going to do the 1000 grit next. Alright, this is after the 1000 grit, so you can start seeing that we're down to a fine enough grit where it's actually starting to look pretty good, even without any wax or anything on it. But you can see that there's a bit of a white haze on there. We're going to get rid of that with the polish, but I'm going to go up a couple more grits and do a little bit more. You can see there's actually a few scratches in there that I just am never going to be able to get out, probably. Actually, that might be my fingernail marks. But there are a couple of scratches in here, so I can get the contrast right on the video, that are a little deeper than the grit that I'm at now, that I probably won't be able to do much with. But the polish will get rid of a lot of these at this point because they're so shallow. So I'm going to go up the next few grits and let's see what it looks like. Okay, I finished sanding this up with 3000 grit sandpaper. So I just grabbed my wax and a foam applicator pad like you normally would, just like waxing a car, and I put some on here. So I'm just letting this dry, and then we're going to buff it off. So this looks like it's dried enough. It's probably been on there a minute or two. Wow, that looks really nice. Let me get a close-up of this. So obviously this is a dirt bike. It's not going to look brand new, and it's not brand new plastic, but I mean, that's pretty shiny. So you can do this to your plastics. It does take a little while, but it's pretty easy to do. So I hope this video is helpful, and I'll see you next time.